So we had always had a practice of listening really intently to households and using that to inform our service and our product. And we sort of amped up on that, right? So first we realized that a lot of the benefits that were still being discussed in terms of new policies or expanding programs were sort of still in conversation, but we were hearing from households, I need money now. And so we partnered with Give Directly and Stand for Children on a project called Project 100, in which we've been able to disperse over $100 million in direct cash assistance to families who use Fresh EBT. That worked because Give Directly had a deep history in cash transfer work and was looking for a way to create a program very quickly in the US and reach families who were income eligible, but wasn't sure how to reach those families. And every household using Fresh EBT is income eligible for the SNAP program, as determined by federal rules and state implementing agencies. And so we were able to start getting money into the hands of households within a few weeks.
That's incredible.
And then we also started getting lots of questions about benefits. So we spun up a new area in the app, which remains one of our most popular features, which is just providing upfront information about how benefits are changing, when to expect new payments, where to check for information in your state. And finally, we expanded our survey work to listen really intently to how the pandemic was impacting households in sort of a real-time, rapid way to be able to change our services. But then we realized also to share with others in the field who are watching and listening and looking for what's next, designing policies, both the policies themselves and how they may be experienced, how they should be implemented. So I wanted to really use this as an opportunity to listen to households and really to pass the microphone to households interacting with the SNAP program to elevate their voices in program policy and design. So the results that we're seeing in our surveys tracks that story almost exactly. So in mid-March, when we started this survey for the first time, we were hearing that a third of our users had less than $100 to get through the next 2 months, whereas they were watching neighbors and friends stock up on food. The average the average amount of time before households were to expect their next EBT deposit or food stamp deposit was 18 days. So households were saying, I have not been able to stack up and I'm not expecting benefits anytime soon. What am I supposed to do? Come the end of March, we started to hear more and more about employment being impacted. So by the end of March, our survey was showing that over 80% who had been employed were reporting loss in income, if not jobs lost entirely, but less than 20% had applied for unemployment insurance. So we're seeing the same trends of sort of getting hit really hard in early March, but not yet access to expanded government benefits. But by the end of May, we started to hear from families that they were starting to get some relief through the government response. So starting to receive the economic impact payments, starting to apply for and receive determination letters on unemployment insurance. By that time, 85% of those who were likely eligible for unemployment insurance had gotten applications in compared to just a few weeks prior. And when we look at our trend data, I'll try to pull these up as well, they tell a similar story over the summer months. So we see sort of a deep hit. This starts in April. That food insecurity continues to increase. through May, and then starts to decrease as folks are getting access to benefits. We see similar trends with employment, but then this kind of leveling off at the end. And we see rates of debt accrual sort of increase pretty dramatically at the beginning and level off, but still stay at very high levels. And we are seeing that similar story throughout the fall of it ticking up a little bit each month. So food insecurity ticking up a little bit each month, economic insecurity and debt really, families really taking on compounding amounts of debt through formal and informal channels. But at the same time, we heard from families very specifically that the government response helped. So for example, we heard from a PEBT participant who said it helped us tremendously because without SNAP and PEBT, we probably wouldn't have food to eat, or we would have to choose between paying bills and eating. The same choice we heard earlier in March from another respondent. This probably falls in the camp of like much of what we're hearing through our survey data of things that are perhaps not necessarily surprising, but still shocking and horrifying. So, the level of depth of hardship amongst households responding to the survey. And then also, in addition, we see racial disparity across a number of areas that we invite households to share. So, for example, if we look at sort of what might be categorized as measures of wealth and income inequality, we were seeing a higher percentage of Black respondents report borrowing money or using credit to make it through the month. Higher percentage of Black respondents report not having or running low on essential household needs to get through the month. And a higher percentage of Black households report risk of losing housing. We're seeing disparities in access to employment. So more Black and Latinx households report a reduction in hours at their current job, and more Black and Latinx households are looking for work than white households. And we see disparities in access to benefits. So we see that more white households report getting their economic impact payment or stimulus checks. And for example, more qualifying Black households report having yet to receive the pandemic unemployment, or excuse me, the PEBT. One of the most sort of startling findings from our surveys, I think, is that many households report borrowing from family and friends, a majority of households. And I don't think that shows up on anybody's ledger, but it is an invisible tax on individuals. And so we hear this in a number of ways, that this sort of cumulative effect of borrowing, the emotional and financial burden of owing a close relationship money and then figuring out how to pay that back. And similarly, figuring out how to help friends and family. So we hear all sorts of things about sort of we emptied our savings account to help my family. My family has been helped by borrowing when I need it, but I really try not to ask because I know they're struggling. Lots of stories like that from households, also supported by the survey questions around rates of borrowing from family and friends is much higher than any other type of borrowing, and also the most common strategy that families are falling back on to make it through the month. So over 60% of households have reported borrowing from family and friends. And we ask this sort of over the last 30 days, have you had to borrow? So consistently we're seeing between 55 and 60% of households reporting that. Higher for households who have children in the home. Of those, over 75% are borrowing from family and friends. So the 55 to 60% are folks who are borrowing to make it through the month. The vast majority of that borrowing is from family and friends. And the vast majority of those who borrow are expected to pay that back. So we hear a lot from households on what isn't working and what could be working better.
Mm-hmm.
A lot is around sort of, we need more than what we have been supplied so far. We're experiencing hardship and I don't feel understood or seen. I've
Mm-hmm.
gone months without help. And I feel like I'm digging into a hole.
Yep.
Lots of people in my family are taking on debt. So we hear debt accrual again as a theme that comes through, but also that the programs that have been enacted over the last year have made a difference. And really what we hear is a need for flexible cash assistance. So households are consistently report using any benefits that come in to pay for things like rent, utilities, and food, almost always in that order. So when we ask, how did you spend your economic impact payment? Rent, utilities, food. When we ask, how did you spend your cash transfer payment through Give Directly? Rent, utilities, food. And when we ask if you have a message for policymakers, what is, if you could pick one thing, and I can show one more slide here if I can get the technology to work, we see the same story. If you could pick one area of support that would be most useful, help with rent, help with utilities, help with food, amongst many other things. And so to me, that's flexible cash assistance. So families can get that money in the door and get it out in an efficient and quick way that is most beneficial for their family and household needs.